Hello and welcome. This is Heavy Business, and I'm Aaliyah.
And I'm Curtis.
And we're here today with our coworker Sophia and our friend Randy Ojeda, a music attorney or attorney. And we're going to talk about, I think we're going to talk a little bit about royalties today. Kind of inspired by Sophia's most recent reel talking about collecting royalties. And a common misconception, and I kind of don't know the answer to this either, but doesn't your distributor collect a lot of the royalties for you? What else do you need to do, and what do they not cover?
So your distributor collects some royalties. They collect, I think, mechanical royalties on the master track, but there are all kinds of other royalties that DistroKid does not collect. DistroKid is only collecting some of the royalties that are generated by, I think, the sound recording, but they're not collecting like publishing royalties. They're not collecting royalties from the composition. And so I should probably backpedal a bit and say there are two copyrights in a song, and each of those copyrights generates its own separate bag of royalties, if you will. So if you're only collecting through your distributor, like say DistroKid or TuneCore or CD Baby, you're only collecting from one side, from one potential source, and you're ignoring all of these other sources that you could be collecting from.
Yeah, I mean, the lawyer answer, of course, is it's complicated,
Yeah.
and it is. It's like
Of course.
it's needlessly complex. And also want to caveat and say that this is specifically for US artists and US royalties, that every country is a little bit different and has different organizations that collect royalties. But yeah, like Sophia said, the key to understanding this is the two sides of the song, essentially. So you have the recording and the actual underlying composition of the song. So the recording is easy. That's obviously the recording of the song. And then the underlying composition is the melody, the lyrics, the beat, all the actual songwriting that comes into play with a song. So your distributor is only collecting from that recording because that's all that they're authorized to collect. Whereas you need several other organizations to collect your publishing royalties, your composition royalties, and your mechanicals, like Sophia was saying. So,
Ooh. Can you please define those? Because most people, I don't think, know what those things are. Is that what you're going to say, Leah?
I was going to ask that, and I have a follow-up to that as well.
Cool.
Yeah. So, that, like I said, there's two splits. So let's take like the recording side. The recording side basically breaks down into two more royalties, which is one is your actual recording revenues. So that is what your distributor is collecting, is recording revenues. And then you have the digital performance royalties, which come from an organization in the US called Sound Exchange. And that's on the recording side. And digital performance royalties are essentially the actual phrasing is non-interactive streams. So essentially like Pandora or Sirius XM or other online radio stations, those are going to be your digital performance royalties. That's separate from being played on the radio or being played, in a coffee shop or something like that. That comes from the other side, which is the composition side of things. And that's where you need a performing rights organization. In the US, there's three. There's BMI, ASCAP, and CSAC. In Canada, there's SOCAN. I believe in the UK, it's PRS. Am I right? And is this ringing any bells to anybody else? Nobody knows the...
You two are the lawyer
UK
types.
I should.
All right.
We need to have Holly here to answer that.
Yeah.
But
So I believe it's PRS in the UK. But either way, you need to register with a performing rights organization in your country, and they're going to collect your actual performance royalties. So, like I said, that's whenever your song is actually performed publicly. And even a stream is considered a performance for all intents and purposes. So you still get money for those streams too. And then on top of that, there's also mechanical royalties, which are basically that mechanical is like an old school music industry term, because it used to be like you would if the record label was selling a record. They had to get a mechanical license from the songwriter in order to publish that record and sell it. So the old rate it used to be, for the longest time, you would get 9.1 cents per sale. So that was an actual like physical sale or a physical download. Now it's like calculated very differently with streaming, but you still, every time you generate a stream, every time you generate a stream, the record label technically, or your distributor, has to pay a mechanical license, and that money comes back to you through a new organization called the Mechanical Licensing Collective, which formed, just recently in the last like 10 years or so, with the Music Modernization Act. I don't want to get too technical, and there's a lot to this, is essentially what I'm saying. And it's very easy to miss stuff and not collect all the money that you're potentially owed. Like Sophia said before the call, there was another band that you guys were talking about who they perform live a lot. You can actually get royalties for performing your own songs live. People don't know that you can do that, but you can submit your set list.
That's wild. That's really cool.
It is because you're technically, performing the composition, and so you can basically submit your set list. BMI has it's called BMI Live. I think ASCAP is called like ASCAP On Stage, something like that. And you can go in there. Yeah.
Where does that money come from? Like, does a venue pay it, or where does it come from eventually?
If you want to break it down, it's a little mafia like, actually, where the performing rights organizations just kind of come knocking on the venue's doors and say like, hey, we need money, pay us up, or else we're going to shut you down because you're playing music illegally, essentially. So every venue, depending on their size, pays a certain amount of money yearly to the performing rights organization, and then that money gets distributed from there. So
so I was going to say, like, if a local band has this and the PROs come and like take the money, if you're registered with a BMI or whatever, are the local venues going to be less likely to book you because then they have to pay you additionally?
No, because it's because they won't know specifically who it is that's submitting a set list, and honestly, like, they're gonna have to pay at some point or another if they're a legitimate venue. Now, if they're like a DIY space or like a house venue or something like that, like, be cool and don't rat on them to BMI, but for any place that's selling like hard tickets or a legitimate music venue is gonna get BMI or ASCAP or CSAC knocking on their door at some point. It's just inevitable.
And don't those venues also pay blanket licenses already?
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, they're gonna get reached out to by one of the PROs to get a blanket license. So either way, there's nothing hurting you by submitting your set lists and the venue information and everything. Like I said, unless you're playing like a house show, then you're probably not going to get royalties.
So is that process of submission something that you might go over in the upcoming seminar?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's definitely something that we're going to talk about, and best practices for doing that. There's also certain time periods that you have to, so you don't have to like do it right away after every show. There's specific quarterly periods that you have to have, all of your shows from the previous period registered in order to collect that money. So yeah, we'll definitely talk about that.
So without going into too much detail then, so there are how many organizations total that a band needs to be registered with in the United States to actually get all their money?
To get all your money, you need to have a distributor.
Of course.
So that's one. You need to be on Sound Exchange. That's two. You need to be registered with a performing rights organization. That's three. And you need to register with the Mechanical Licensing Collective. So four.
Okay, so four total. So
yeah.
Now, I'm assuming most bands are not actually registered with all four in your experience, correct?
No, and oftentimes bands only have a distributor. Like we said, like they don't have a Sound Exchange account. They don't have their PRO set up, or if they do, they're not actively registering all their songs and collecting what they're supposed to.
Okay.
That's something you see all the time, is that literally every single song needs to be registered, or else you're not going to collect any money on that song, you know.
We've seen some people with like really, really successful songs that just are not registered with BMI or ASCAP, and so they're generating all these streams. They're really popular songs. People are playing them, and they're generating lots and lots of royalties, but they're not collecting on those royalties because they're not registered with ASCAP or BMI.
Yeah. And there's unfortunately there's a time limit on it too. So there's something called the black box royalties, which is essentially after so many years, whatever money doesn't get collected by these performing rights organization goes into the black box. And then that money gets redistributed to everybody else that's in the performing rights organization instead of going to you, which is kind of crazy to think about, that, you know, Taylor Swift and Drake might be getting the money that's you're supposed to get because they're registered and you're not, you know.
Okay, so how do I want to phrase this here? So you got the four things. So how many people are, not how many people, how much money are we actually talking? So let's say a band gets, I don't know, 5,000 streams a month roughly. They're just collecting their DistroKid. How much money are we talking here? Are we talking like $10, $20, hundreds of bucks? Like what?
It's a great question.
Not even
Like, is it worth it to go
Yeah.
to the lawyer to get
if you're
registered?
just collecting through DistroKid, I can tell you now, I have like almost 30,000 streams and maybe like $25. So that's just with DistroKid.
Yeah, I mean, DistroKid's definitely not collecting everything, and it's all this adds up, especially if you think about the pace at which people release music these days. Like, people are releasing more and more music all the time, faster and faster. So it's like, you know, all these sort of little streams of revenue will add up to a bigger stream at some point.
But you didn't actually answer the question. How much are we talking here roughly per year if you're getting like 5,000 streams a month?
Probably not much if you're getting 5,000 streams a month.
Okay.
Now, if you're getting 50,000 streams a month, 500,000 streams a month, 1,000,000 streams a month, then, you know, then it's definitely worth it.
Okay.
But, you know, don't sell yourself short, and set yourself up accordingly, so that if you do have a song that, you know, they put in the new season of Stranger Things or whatever, and it blows up, and you're suddenly a song from 20 or 30 years ago is a massive hit, and, you know, you want to make sure all that stuff is properly registered. So
I did want to ask about that. Is it too late? Like, when is it too late to register these things? Like, if that happened, and a band and it didn't register it until after the song was in an episode of Stranger Things, for example, would they still be able to collect on their royalties, or would it be too late?
No, I mean, there's, like I said, they hold on to the royalties for, it's kind of a nebulous amount of time, but it's a few years, you know. So
I heard 3 years. I think.
3 years is, I think, the most accurate time frame, but it's not like an exact science from what I've heard. So definitely get on it sooner rather than later, of course, but you do have some time. Like, if something were to blow up, or you'd get an amazing sync placement, or somehow you have a big viral TikTok hit or something like that, and you haven't registered your song, like, do it, and you can still get some of those back royalties. But just do it while you can. But that's a great question.
You have to get, okay, this is probably a dumb question, but I'm gonna ask it anyways.
There's no dumb questions, Curtis.
There are dumb questions. There are dumb questions.
not when it
There
comes to
are
music
dumb
royalties.
questions, and Curtis will ask them.
I will ask them. I will definitely ask them. So, okay, so do you have to register each and every single time for a new album or a new song?
Yeah, every song needs to be registered.
Every song.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what is the process like that? Like, do they have to hire a lawyer each time? Is it simplified? Like,
it depends on what your catalog's like, and, you know, how many collaborators you have, how many people you have.
let's say it's Sophia with 100 million collaborators, you know, and
if you have that many collaborators, you should probably hire a lawyer, because you
Fair.
definitely need some agreements drawn up between the people involved. But if you're just a solo artist, you know, you're releasing music, you're releasing music out of your bedroom, and it's just you, you know, you probably don't need a lawyer. I think you can go to these places and do it yourself. There's also some publishing administration companies out there that They take a percentage of your royalties, but they will collect them all for you. So the biggest one is called Song Trust. There's also another one called I'm trying to blank at the other big one. Yeah, I can't think of it. Anyway, Song Trust is the biggest one, obviously,
Fair.
which is why it's the one I can think of. Centric is the other one. Shout out to my friends at Centric. I apologize for forgetting your company name. But there's other, smaller publishing administrators as well that'll do the same thing for you. Usually they take somewhere between like 15 to 20% of royalties, maybe 30% if they're doing a lot of work. So that's something to consider too, that if you are making significant money, do you really want to give up another, decent percentage, or can you handle that, that publishing end yourself, which you definitely can do. It just takes time and the knowledge to know where to go,
Okay, so
I want to really quick go
ahead.
back to TikTok.
Yeah.
That you
I actually
mentioned.
want to go back to that too because I have a question after you.
Oh, well, go ahead and ask yours.
Okay. So we were talking about Sound Exchange and I think passive digital streaming royalties.
Non-interactive streams.
Non-interactive.
Yes. Yeah.
We were talking about those in my copyright law class recently, and I'm constantly learning new things about how this works. So if Sound Exchange is not collecting the interactive digital streaming royalties, then who is?
Technically, those are coming through your mechanical royalties, but from the master side mechanicals. So I guess technically they're coming from your I guess your distributor would have them. Yeah, that's a good question though. And like with there's a lot of gray areas in that part of law right now. Like TikTok is a perfect example. One, I don't know if this is what you were going to ask, Leah, or not, but TikTok is like you don't really get paid for TikToks, like the music used in TikToks, unless it's like a commercial use. So like if you have a TikTok business account, you can only use certain songs because you're using them commercially. So it has to be songs that are already cleared for a commercial license. Whereas if you have a personal TikTok, like if you have your own TikTok channel or whatever, you can use basically any song and you don't have to pay anything because it's like for personal use. Even if you have millions of streams, it's very like it's a very weird fine line, I guess, with that.
Yeah, I was just gonna ask like about that. What do you get paid for on TikTok, and how do you collect on it? So yeah, you basically answered the question.
Isn't that called micro sync too? Like where you're syncing little bits of songs to like short videos on Instagram, Facebook, and stuff like that.
Yeah, totally. So that's where those commercially cleared songs come from. Is they have to have a micro sync license. So a lot of distributors now offer that as a service where they'll do micro sync for you and they'll make your catalog available in that commercial commercial use store, or commercial use database, or whatever you want to call it, from TikTok. But that is another very, very interesting part of the industry right now, and something you want to be very careful when you're signing deals, that you're not giving up your sync rights or your micro sync rights, because that can be a significant portion of income these days.
Can you kind of go over what sync rates are for those people that do not know?
Yeah, so sync is another, like, they're not royalties so much, but it's another way that you can get royalties. And sync is short for synchronization. So that's literally syncing up music with video, audio and video together. So using a song in a movie or a TV show or on a commercial is you have to get what's called the synchronization rights, or the sync rights for that song. And you get paid, again, back to the two sides, you get paid in two separate ways from syncs. You get paid for the actual recording, and that's usually an upfront fee. And then you get paid from the composition side, where you don't get anything up front, but your publisher or your performing rights organization will collect those royalties for you every time the movie airs on television or whatever it is. But very good question. because sync is super important.
Okay, so kind of going back just a teeny little bit here. So what, again, without going into too much detail, since we're going to be doing a seminar on this later,
Yeah.
for anybody who's listening.
And in the seminar, I can tell you a lot about some tips to really get the most out of sync. And if you're trying to break into sync, that's definitely something we'll talk about on the seminar, is how to best set your music up for something that's syncable, and making
Perfect.
sure you're actually collecting on those rights.
Perfect. So just to go on the legal end of things here. So like person wants to hire an entertainment lawyer to help them get all their royalties. How should they be picking who they deal with? Because obviously there's people that don't know what they're doing, even if they're a lawyer. I know that because obviously there'd be no reason for you guys to have to deal with other lawyers if everybody knew what they were doing. So
Yeah.
how do you kind of know who to hire?
Like which lawyer to hire?
Yeah, like what are the how should they be shopping for someone to help them get all their royalties and stuff like that?
Generally, they should have a lot of experience in the music industry and like have that specialized knowledge of how the industry works, because there are a lot of different types of law out there, and some people just may not have the specialized knowledge that it takes, even if they're a lawyer, to understand how this works and get you everything that you're entitled to.
I'm not a divorce lawyer.
Yeah, exactly. And that's something that Sophia and I see a lot in the industry, is people will, their friend is a lawyer and they do, mergers and acquisitions for a
Yeah.
big firm, and they love music, so they might as well just read the contract for me, and I'm sure that'll be fine. And you don't realize that there's all these other things that if you're not dealing with this kind of stuff day in and day out, it's really easy to get confused and really easy to miss stuff, and that's how you end up missing out on major chunks of revenue or control over your music.
Okay, so they get someone to help them get all their royalties collected and stuff like that. Then what happens? They have to come back to you again year after year. How does it work?
No, I mean, once you kind of set things up right, and obviously you still have to keep registering new songs as
Yeah.
they come in, which you might need a lawyer for if or you can do that on your own.
Yeah.
But once you're kind of in the system, I mean, they're really just going to start sending you checks. Like, you're going to get a check in the mail every quarter, every time they pay out, and hopefully those checks get bigger and bigger.
I think
So
they have a threshold too. So like with ASCAP, you can't receive a check by mail until you hit $100, I think.
Yeah, that sounds
But you
about right.
can also sync ASCAP with your bank account so that they pay you below the threshold. But I mean, if you're not hitting the threshold, obviously it's not going to be a lot. But
Yeah.
that's another thing that you can do with ASCAP.
cool. Okay, so you're registered, you got the royalties and everything like that. Okay, so now one question I did have is, like, I know sometimes musicians will say they weren't getting paid enough royalties. How can that be, and how do you resolve that when it happens? I'm sure it happens with you guys a lot.
Yeah, I mean, usually, so typically your performing rights organization is going to be pretty on point with what you're supposed to get. It's the publisher and the label or distributor that sometimes there's issues. If their accounting isn't current and their accounting isn't correct, then you could have problems. And typically, the bigger distributors are usually pretty good about this, but especially some smaller or independent labels, like, they just might not have their accounting up to snuff, and record label accounting is really difficult. Like, I get it, but yeah, that can be where the discrepancy comes in, is if there's a smaller label or somebody involved who isn't really keeping up with the books the way they should.
And also, like, you're still just not generating a ton of royalties unless you're getting a lot of streams in total. So a lot of people think that, oh, I'm entitled to all of these different things, like I'm entitled to this giant chunk of money, but you're not generating the streams to match that up.
I get $2. That's all you get. That's all you
Yeah,
get.
sometimes.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm sure. Okay, so this is probably more directed at Randy than Sophia, but whoever wants to answer, go for it. So, a lot of times artists will say that they only get a little bit of money from streaming. So you're saying that that's because they haven't registered with all four, correct? Like I know Matt Heafy from Trivium had one time posted a check, I think it was like for 2 cents or something like that, which just doesn't make any sense because it's fucking
For Trivium, it makes no sense.
It makes no fucking sense. So
yeah.
I don't know which one of you guys can explain this, but if someone can, that would be great.
No, I mean, I'm not trying to say that streaming pays fairly or anything. Like, I still think that artists are underpaid.
2 cents. Come on, for Trivium.
Not even 2 cents, like 0.02 cents.
Yeah,
It's
dumb,
like, it's so you're not getting, unfortunately, you're not getting that much money from streaming. But that's particularly why you need to register with all these other organizations, because every little dollar counts. This
You
is
need to collect your pennies.
Yes, collect your pennies.
And also, if you're like trying to recoup in advance, if you're on a label, you're probably not going to see many royalties until you recoup that advance. So
let's talk about this for a second, Sophia, since you brought it up, because this is a common misunderstanding. Why don't you talk about this for a brief moment? Because I know you know about this.
Yeah. So a lot of people don't understand that when a record label gives you an advance, it's a loan. They're not just kind of giving you free money. So you don't actually get paid until you repay the advance. And sometimes that advance is huge. And so essentially, until you repay that advance, you're probably not really going to see royalties from your music. That's basically the gist of it, is that a lot of people don't understand. It's not just this one way, oh, we're giving you money to record music and tour and sell merch. That's not what it is.
I have a question on that. Is there any benefit to paying off the label early out of your own pocket versus having them collect it from royalties?
Ooh, yes.
That's an interesting question. I mean, I don't, I guess if you were
I'm just like the type of person, I don't like to have any debt. I don't like to have any debt. So I like paying things off as quickly as possible.
Yeah. So typically, with most label deals, a label will give an advance, and then they'll also have control of the music for a certain period of time. And oftentimes that time period, the clock doesn't start ticking until the advance is fully recouped. So in that sense, it would be really smart to pay your advance off as soon as possible, because then you get your music back in 7 years instead of 10 years or something like that, So yeah, there definitely could be some benefits to paying it off early, but at that point I would ask, like, why did you take an advance if you have money in your pocket? It's like,
well, you might be able to pay it off sooner than just collecting the royalties would pay it off, even if you couldn't pay for it, the album out of pocket to begin with.
Yeah, so that would be a scenario. It always depends on what's in the deal and what the contract says.
It's kind of like paying off your house early or something. People get house loans, but they can pay their houses off early sometimes.
Right. Which, good for them. I mean,
Yeah, and these days, like, you should probably think really hard before you sign to a label, because you have all these options on the internet to distribute your music yourself and to hire your own PR and to do your own marketing. They're just
This is true.
To me, it doesn't seem like labels are the necessity that they used to be, because music is so much more accessible to more people. So you really don't need a label, in my opinion, unless you want the clout that comes with being on a label, which can be helpful in some scenarios. But to me, it just seems like the benefits of putting all the pieces together yourself is going to yield better returns for you in the long run than signing with a label.
Well,
and you'll probably get a better. Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Sorry, Lee. I was gonna say you'll probably get a better deal too if you build what you're doing on your own first, and then a label approaches you, rather than signing to a label, off the rip, and then they sign you to a crappy deal because you have no leverage.
Well, a lot of labels won't even like sign you if you haven't already built up your reputation on your own. And so in that case, even more so, what's the point? So definitely something to think about before signing a deal.
When I did A&R, they didn't even want me talking to bands that were under 100,000 monthly listeners. So that was like
100,000. We had a
Yeah.
metal company
that
tell
for
us
metal?
10,000.
Was
yeah.
that for a metal label or was that
That
for
was
like
not a metal
name?
label. That was
Okay.
a pretty large distributor.
Yeah, that's going to be a different situation.
Yeah, it's
for
a
most.
different. Yeah, it's totally.
I'm
different
just amused
situation.
because they went 10,000. Randy's talking 100,000. So it's
Well, so one thing that's interesting about metal, and I learned this in my time as A&R, is that metal fans, there are less of them, but they are the most dedicated fans, and they listen so much more. So you actually could have more streams with less monthly listeners, just because those monthly listeners are really, really listening.
Sure.
That's fair. That's fair.
So,
I wanted to go back once again to so what are some things that a lawyer or a band, or rather a band's lawyer, should be checking for in regards to, like, how much money they're getting, that type of thing. Like what should they be looking for? What are the red flags? All these types of things.
Really good question. I think you should just make sure that the numbers kind of make sense. I know
What are the
that is,
numbers that make sense though? Like, let's say
Yeah.
Shield of Wings is going to sign a deal with some label. What should they be looking for? Shield of Wings is the latest band, by the way, if you don't know. They're going to sign a band. They're going to sign with a label. Like, what should they be looking for in terms of numbers? These types of things.
Yeah, I would first look at the percentage that the label's asking for.
Okay.
So a lot of independent labels do 50-50 deals, which in the indie scene kind of makes sense because you're both kind of grinding in the same point. A lot of major labels will do like 60-40, 70-30 splits in their favor, and then distributors will do kind of the flip. So you maybe do like an 80-20 deal with a distributor where the artist is getting 80, the distributor is getting 20, something like that. So first, just look at those split numbers. And then if they're offering an advance or a marketing budget, I would look at try to get a real hard look at your streaming numbers and like how much you're making monthly, and then try to figure out if you can make back that advance within the terms of the contract. So if it's if they're going to give you $30,000 for 5 years or whatever, like take a look at how much you're doing on streaming, and are you going to be able to recoup that $30,000 in 2 years? Then okay, maybe it's a good deal. Are you going to be stuck in this for forever? Then don't take that advance, So those are numbers I always look at is how much is does the advance make sense? Does the number make sense? Because oftentimes a label with a lot of money could lead with a big advance, but if you're never going to pay that back, then they're basically just going to own you until you do. So
That's
just something to think about.
I have one or two more questions if we got time left.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So
also make sure to make time to talk about the seminar when it's happening, all that details.
That is true. We need to go over that. That's right. I wanted Sophia to kind of go over the mistakes she's noticed, because she's been doing a lot of videos on copyright and royalties and all sorts of things. So I just wanted to give her a spotlight to kind of go over what she sees.
Yeah, so again, the biggest thing that I've noticed is that people just do not understand where the different royalties are coming from and how they can collect all of those. They just go in and they think that their distributor is going to collect everything, but they don't understand there are 2 copyrights in a song, and each of those generates its own separate bag of royalties. So that's probably the biggest thing. The other thing, again, going back to my previous point, people seem to think that signing to a label is kind of this holy grail that's going to get you everywhere that you want to go. But you really need to look closely at the terms of that deal and whether it's going to serve your career in the way that you want it to, because your expectations may not necessarily be aligned with what the label can offer. So there have been a couple of instances where people seem to be disappointed or upset with the results that their label is getting them, and they're not really, and they don't seem to understand that when they signed that deal, the label was only going to do certain things for them. The label was not going to touch certain activities. The label was not going to like put money towards certain things, and they didn't understand that, you know, if you sign to an indie label, you're probably going to retain more rights to your music and retain more artistic freedom and creativity, but you're not necessarily going to see the huge results that a major label would get. So a lot of people are expecting major label results on smaller labels. And I'm not saying that's impossible, but it's if you want that major label clout, then maybe you should just go with major label. So
I
Yeah.
like it.
I don't know if that made sense, but that's
I think that made perfect sense.
Same.
Yeah.
And as you know, Sophia, I think one of the most common things that people ask us is, you know, I'm in this record deal. How do I get out of it? You know, people are always reaching out trying to get out of record deals, and oftentimes you can't. You know, sometimes you're just stuck. You know, like you signed what you signed, and now you're in it. You know, so
So read the term carefully and
exactly.
the termination clause.
Yes.
We should probably re-bring up that point before we go back onto the seminar bit. Make sure that you hire the right type of lawyer to read your contract, and not
Absolutely.
Uncle Bob, the tax lawyer, or something like that.
Yeah.
So Randy, would you just quickly kind of go over why that is, just because you didn't really cover that, and then we can get on to the seminar.
Why you should hire a music attorney? Or
Yeah, like what, like because like what's the difference? You guys all study fucking law, like who cares, right?
yeah, but nobody studies music law, you know, like, except for a music lawyer. You know, so it's like very yeah, it's just the business has so many nuances and so many things, and you know, you're gonna hear this a lot if you're in the music industry and you go to seminars and things, but people always say that the music business is a relationship business.
Yeah.
And it totally is. It's all about, you know, who you know and who you're connected to, and you know, oftentimes just, you know, me knowing, you know, the distributor and dealing with the same person at the same company for this occasion and that occasion, you know, it makes it easier to get deals done, and it makes it, you know, easier to be respected when you know, when you come into the room with somebody that has the experience in the industry, you know.
Yeah, and
It's just like
it's
just like if you were, you know, if you were arrested for you know, joyriding in a stolen vehicle or whatever, you would want an attorney who knows the judges and knows
I'm
the other
calling you
attorneys.
guys. I know you
Don't
two.
call
So
me.
I'm calling you
There's
two.
nothing I
I'm
can do for
calling
you,
you
man.
two. I don't care.
No.
You're on your own. You're on your own if you call me.
I'm still fucking calling you guys.
Well, I'll refer you out. I'll refer you to somebody
Refer
else.
me though.
Yeah. But yeah, so I mean, you want the attorney in that situation. You want an attorney that knows the judges, knows the other attorneys, and knows the system. It's the same way with music. Like, you want an attorney that knows the key players in the game, and you want to know that they know the rules of the game, you know.
Yeah,
And it is
there's
kind
no
of a game.
substitute for that real world, like hands-on experience in the music industry. Like a lot of music attorneys that I've met, that I talk to, they all have some kind of experience in the music industry, whether they're managers or they're record label owners or they're artists themselves. They all know the industry because they're in it. So that's not like a prerequisite for being a music attorney, obviously, but it really helps to have that experience.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
I guess we need to wrap with talking about the seminar. So in February, we are holding a seminar. I don't remember the date. Do either of you two remember? I don't remember. I think it's the 24th of February. Nobody remembers. Perfect. I'm prepared, all of us. All right.
We're doing a great job of plugging this
Yes.
seminar.
Awesome. So I
With
think
the
it's
date that we
February.
don't remember.
I think it's February 24th we're doing it. We will put it in the show notes, I think, once we do it. But Randy, can you kind of go over briefly? I know we haven't totally outlined it yet, but if you could briefly go over what in your mind you are going to be teaching, that would be amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I'm an open book. I mean, whatever people want to know, I'm down to talk about it. But we'll definitely be going over royalties, and you know, in much more in depth. Yeah. And then we'll be going over, you know, band partnership agreements, what they are, why they're necessary. We'll be talking about label deals and publishing deals and management deals. Basically, you know, the things that come across our desk most often, as it pertains specifically to bands. I know this is a heavy focus show, so we're going to talk about, you know, what's important for heavy music.
Cool. Very, 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 very cool. And do you want to go over really quickly your free consultation that you have available?
Yes. So this is we're offering it for select bands right now, but if you're listening to this, you have been selected, and we're basically offering free consultations. They're just quick 15-minute calls. You can we can do it over Google Meet, or we can do it on the phone, and just talk for a little bit about what you're doing, what you're working on, and we can find some ways that we can help and help steer you in the right direction, and hopefully work together in the future. But if not, we'll at least point you in the right direction of where you need to go. So if you're looking for a free consultation right now, it is an invite only thing. You can reach out to Curtis, he's got the link, or you can reach out to myself or Sophia, and we'll definitely give you the link. Might be opening it up down the line to more folks, but for right now, it is, like I said, it is for the chosen ones. And if you're listening to this, you are a chosen one. So
Do not ask me
I
any
love
stupid
it.
questions, right?
no, please. I love, like I said, there are no stupid questions when it comes to music rights and royalties. I totally
No one
understand.
understands it.
Yeah,
No
this
one
is a foreign
understands.
language. So
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Well, thank you so much, both of you, for coming on the podcast and talking about this opaque subject. Hopefully, we made it a little less opaque for some of you listening, and everyone listening. Thank you for listening. And until next time, you know what to do. Make like a bull and throw those horns up.